Hey friends, welcome back to Bible Fun with the Duns. We didn't know who was going to start.
No.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Today we read 2 Kings chapter 22, and it was a really good chapter about King Josiah. So King Josiah is the great-great-grandson of Hezekiah, and I kind of just want to,
I think great-grandson.
great-grandson of Hezekiah.
Hezekiah.
Manasseh, Ammon, Josiah. So Hezekiah was great, a good king in God's eyes. And then we just read Manasseh and Ammon, and they were not great. They were idol worshipers of all the other gods, and they brought back, especially Manasseh, brought back all the high places, just anything you could worship, he set it up and made an altar to it.
I find it interesting with all of these last few guys, all of them are major reformers. When they get the throne, like they are aggressive in spiritual. No, they're aggressive in spiritual leadership. Now, some of them are for evil and some of them are for good, but none of them are really like indifferent.
None are lazy.
Yeah,
that is interesting. They're hot or cold.
That's right.
So Josiah, he takes the throne when he is 8, and even early on, I guess he learned maybe from Grandpa Manasseh after he was repented and changed his life, or great grandpa Hezekiah, who knows, but he had it in him.
It was this high priest.
Okay.
So the high priest of in Judah, Hilkiah, was kind of a mentor to him.
He was doing his job.
That's right.
Well, then Josiah turns 18 and he decides, you know what, this temple is important. We need to worship God, and he starts restoring the temple. And through that, he gets his servant to go clean out an area, and they find the law, the book of the Bible, pretty much. And so Hilkiah, they take it to Hilkiah, and they read it, and they bring it to the king. And what's so crazy and interesting is if you go back to the law, and he's reading this, it says that the kings are actually supposed to write down their own copy, make their own book, and have it for themselves, and to read it every year.
That's right.
To keep it fresh on their minds. Well, guess what? It's been a while since that's been practiced. Yep. So much so that the book is hidden somewhere and they have to find it in the recesses.
So probably that King's book he's talking about is probably the book of Deuteronomy. Because the book of Deuteronomy basically sums up Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. But it could be that this is the whole Old Testament. It's interesting that they just call it a book. Not the book, but a book. Which shows really how far it's gone. Now, what I think is interesting about that is, like, I find it really hard to believe that an entire nation that was created under the all-inspiring power of God.
The whole point.
The whole point of the whole thing is God, and now we've got His Word, and they just call it, well, we found a book. Well, what's the book? Well, then they start reading and they figure out, oh, this is from God to us. So it just takes like a generation, and they've completely forgot what the book is. Now, that sounds absolutely crazy to me, but I'm gonna tell you what, I know of people who it just took one generation, and like biblical literacy went to almost absolutely nothing. So,
absolutely.
So years ago, I had like old preachers would tell you that they could start a sermon and they could just like reference Abraham did this. So like, and then they would just get into a sermon.
And everyone would remember the whole story.
Yeah, everybody would go, oh yeah, we know who Abraham is. Now we go to a point where when I say Abraham, there are people who are like new Christians, adults, didn't grow up in church, and when I say the word Abraham, they're going, it's interesting. Who is that? I'm like, all right, let's start back over with the song, you know?
Yes.
So it's surprising how fast it went.
Agree. And so I'm sure you have lots to say, but my takeaway from just this idea, it's the importance of the word and the fact that we are held accountable to God's word, whether we make it a priority to know it or not. Something that I've noticed through reading chronologically is before the law is even given, even when Adam and Eve are there and Cain and Abel, they know murder is wrong before the 10 Commandments came about. They know good and bad. And so they are held accountable to this law, and we are too. So really, it's so important for us to be diligent to study and to read God's word. And if anything, to keep it on the forefront of our mind of how we are to live every single day. Because look at Josiah when he reads, he is broken when he reads this and he realizes, oh my goodness, look how far we have strayed. Look how upside down we look from how God's plan was for his own people.
Couple of guys that I like, they picked up on the same thing you're saying. So Tony Evans says that when it looks like Josiah, like he's broken, Tony Evans says this is what it looks like when God's word delivers convicting power. So same thing you're picking up. Warren Wiersbe, years before that, he said that how people respond to God's word is a good indication of their spiritual appetite and the strength of their desire to please the Lord. And that's powerful. Now, I was reading this morning, I was reading Jeremiah. There's an interesting kind of connection here because all this is happening about the same time. Like as Kings is winding down, Jeremiah's ministry begins, and like he'll go into the exile. So Jeremiah,
he's weeping.
That's right. So Jeremiah's watching all this happen, and God tells Jeremiah, he said, you know, the southern kingdom of Judah, who outlasted the northern kingdom, who went into exile from Assyria. Now, you know, it's been a while, but the southern kingdom is still hanging on. God tells Jeremiah that the southern kingdom is actually more guilty than the northern kingdom. Because even though they had both sinned in gross ways, like grossly following these demonic idols, okay, they'd both done that. The reason why Judah, the southern kingdom, that we're talking about here, that the reason that they're more guilty is because they saw what happened to the northern kingdom. They saw where their idols took them spiritually and even physically in exile. And they saw it all and they said, we don't care. And they kept going. So now they're doubly guilty because of what they've done and because of the responsibility they've been given. So that's why Josiah is kind of a breath of fresh air right here at the end. Of the 20 rulers in Judah, only 8 of them were described as doing right in the eyes of the Lord, and
then only 4 fully got rid of the high places.
That's
of
right.
Those 8.
That's right. And Josiah is one of the best of all of these kings, but it's almost like it's too little too late because they're already headed down this direction.
Disaster is imminent for Judah, but Josiah, he gets the gift of death, actually. He doesn't have to go into exile like
That's right. God told him, he said, you know, because you've sought me, I'm gonna let you go to heaven before all this bad stuff happens.
I love that idea that it's the gift. That is the goal. We forget that sometimes.
That's right. So I like how when it talks about him, it says, and he did what was right in the sight of the Lord and walked in the ways of his father David and did not turn to the right hand or to the left. Well, David was his ancestor, but not his father. So we've watched all of these lines go from like, you know, Hezekiah and Manasseh and Amon and Josiah. We've watched all these generations progress. And what we're figuring out is one would do right, the other would do wrong. Then the next generation would do right and the next would do wrong. You don't have to follow the faith of your parents. I know godly parents whose children are not, and I know some very godly people whose parents were not. So there is all that. So even though David was not his direct father, David was at least his example. And I like that. I like how that's how it goes into it. But I also like that it's never too early to start walking with the Lord. He's 8. He's not even reached his bar mitzvah yet. He's still very much a young child. And yet all of this, the Lord's moving in his life. One commentary I like said, talked about how we respond to God's word really says everything about what's happening in our heart. And it indicates here that Josiah's response to God's word, even though he was so young, it shows spiritual maturity. And I think the takeaway here is, are you willing to lead those around you aggressively spiritually? Are you leading in the right direction? Are you spiritually mature in your decision making? And are you committed to making things right, even if they haven't like historically been right? Are you committed to making them right? And by the way, there was a lot of folks who probably didn't agree with him, and he did it anyway. Mm-hmm. I think that took some commitment. So anyway, that's what I got out of it.
Sounds good.
All right. So we hope to see you tomorrow in 2 Kings 23. See you then.
Bye.